out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about ideas, language. Even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Beyond Islam and unbelief, there is a desert plain. For us, there is a passion in the midst of that expanse. The knower of God who reaches there will prostrate in prayer, for there is neither Islam nor unbelief, nor anywhere in that place. Az kufre ze Islam barun, Sarah ye es mara bamiyani anfaza, Sadiyes arif cho baddaan rasid sara beni ad na kufro na Islam na anjay jayes. Big up Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, with translations provided by Coleman Barks and Ibrahim Gamard. Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Mir, Ni hao, Buenos dias, Buenos tardes, Heseche, Aquaba, Vilkeman, what up though? This is Convo with Zuri G. I am Zuri G, aka Peter Johansson OCC, and today the convo is with brother Nate, aka Nate Popitz. So this is another convo from the archives from like half a decade ago. And it's from the Mixed Spirit series. So Nate actually is a brother that I meet, I guess, when he is a nephew, actually, to be honest about it. A little bit of a long story, but he's from the neighborhood, he's from the hood, and I would camp out in front of the library doing a peace proclamation. And he would come from the middle school. A lot of middle schoolers would stop by at the end of the school day and go to the library and would ask me, like, what am I doing? So we have convo about what I was doing. And I seem to have this conversation before. But anyway, so police would stop by. People at the going to the library, patrons would stop by. Librarian would stop by. What's all this? So anyways, Nate is one of the brethren that stopped by, and he was very like insightful and like aware type of young brother. And since then, that was like that was about 15 years ago actually. So I actually move elsewhere and continue the peace proclamation in other ways. He continues on through Heights. And I would see him quelquefois here and there sometimes, but we kind of go in our different things. So now I move here where I'm living at this moment, on Mayfield and Coventry Roads in the UNI village, we say, and it's a place where people hang out. There's establishments, there's open mics and stuff like that. And when Nate is a high schooler, he begins performing his puppetry and ventriloquism on the open mic stages, and so he would hang out in this vicinity, and we would like. He's tall. He's a very distinctive looking young brother, and we would like continue the convo. But at that point, he's like a teenager and late teens. And so, anyways, we continue the convo for years. He's at this point in his mid to late 20s. So anyways, this convo that we have, the Mixed Spirit series, is just I sit down and talk about his life experience. Now he's also mixed, obviously, being in that series, and that's one of the things that we talk about, that experience, and his multi-religious spirituality, the different religious traditions and experiences that he is born into, Christian, Jewish, and additionally. So that's some of the stuff that we talk about in this conversation. And I guess the commentaries for afterwards. So that's pretty much it. That's what I got to share. He is, I want to like, he's just a kind and genuine dude, and we don't agree on everything, but we also find the common ground, and there are certain people with whom conversation is easier and it's less forced or fake or whatever else. There's like a comfort. So I guess it's the absence of judgment and like condemnation. And so that's part of what Brother Nate shares. So here's the convo. All right. So Nate, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing chilling like vanillin. So basically, let me give you a background of what this is all about. So I do interfaith work, building bridges and peace and understanding, cooperation between different religious communities, and I also do mixed ethnicity outreach and activism as well. And so this project is kind of like bridging those two realms, because in the interfaith movement there's very little talk about mixed ethnicity, like the actual mixing between communities. And in the mixed ethnicity community, there's very little talk about spirituality and religion. It's kind of like the taboo subject, the elephant that's in the room. So this project is kind of bridging those divides and showing that there's a nexus, there's a common experience, and particularly giving other mixed ethnicity people some insight and perspective about the experience of spirituality, particularly coming from a mixed ethnicity perspective. And so I'm just interviewing a few friends and just talking casually about spiritual experience, and that's basically the background of this project and this interview. So my intention is to basically talk for about 30 minutes. I have 5 questions, and pretty open-ended, straightforward questions. And my thought is to kind of like organically explore and see where the conversation goes for each question, and explore your answers. And then whenever you're comfortable moving on to the next question, that's fine. That's pretty much it. And so obviously I'm recording this, and I plan on editing it afterwards. For those who are watching this, we tried to record through Skype. I am uncertain how to do it. We had technical difficulty connecting otherwise, so this is how we're doing it. And that's kind of like, that's endemic or typical of the mixed experience of just making do with what we have and adjusting and making the necessary adaptations given the situation. So that's what we're doing. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Here we go with the first question. Giving a little bit of a history and a background on yourself, but even going beyond yourself. My first question, it's actually 2 parts. One is, what is the ethnic background and the spiritual background of your father, and what is the ethnic background and spiritual background of your mother?
All right. Well, that's actually it's an interesting question.
Sure.
Because my father's white, and he was raised Jewish. My grandfather was Jewish, and his biological mother Jewish as well.
Huh.
So he was raised Jewish. I'm not quite sure what he believes now. but my grandfather is my tie to Judaism in every way. I feel like I do consider myself. I always say half Jewish.
I hear you.
And it was funny to always like talk about him, like he was Jewish, but he ate pork ribs.
Yeah,
big ribs. It's really kind of funny. And, that's kind of it wasn't ever like the biggest thing in his life.
Okay.
But we definitely was. He respected that part of his life. He told my mother, let's get tattoos and what have you, and very much, that's was his fate. My mother's black. She was raised, I believe, Catholic. Her father was the son of a Baptist preacher in Mississippi.
Wow.
This is way during Jim Crow era.
Sure.
So Mississippi Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Mississippi, excuse me. And he was Baptist, I believe. He never went to church. Apparently, he only read the Bible like through and through, the whole thing.
Okay.
That was his church. My grandmother was Catholic, and it's funny because you never know her church was a Catholic church. It was deep in the hood in Detroit.
Okay.
But she was Catholic. I never even knew she was Catholic, honestly. Like I never put two and two together.
Okay.
And my mother now is Episcopalian.
Interesting.
I was raised Episcopalian actually.
Okay.
And my mother is she's Episcopalian. Goes to Trinity in downtown Cleveland, etc.
Yeah, I've been there a number of times.
Mm-hmm. That's her church. She
Okay.
loves it there. And it's funny. The building I live in now is right down the street from my old church that I grew up in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do your parents meet? And how do they build that connection?
My dad hears this is going to kill me. I don't even care. my parents, they met. They met at a TGI Fridays, actually.
What was that? I heard Fridays. That's what I heard.
Fridays.
A T-Shack Fridays?
A TGI Fridays.
Oh, TGI Fridays. Okay, yeah.
And sorry, the sound. Something happened to the sound. I can hear you.
I can hear you fine.
All right, so they met there in Detroit. Next thing they know, they're together, and
Sure.
etc.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's a very odd story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So, obviously, there's a connection between your father and your mother, and your father is coming from this comparatively secular Jewish experience, and your mother's coming from a combined Catholic and Episcopalian experience. How do you was there like you talk about your grandfather? So what was there? What was the experience with your father growing up? Here's the question. I'll go to the second question. How about that? Which is like a nice transition. So this is the second question. What do your parents teach you as a child, either religiously or just ethically? Like what kind of lessons and morals do your parents teach you?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Because both my parents said the same thing to me, like you're still half white.
Okay.
Because I identify as black.
I hear you.
But they both kind of had that. But like it was. We grew up, in the suburbs. And we were very, kind of, suburban type of living. My parents are divorced, by the way, but I clarify that. But
sure.
Business people, they're very much so business people.
Okay.
So there's that. So my mother always just taught me, treat people how you want to be treated.
Right.
Speak properly. she never let us like use any kind of slang or any kind of different voice. Like she's like, I know it's not your voice, stop it, kind of, we were raised, to be proper. That's why I speak as well as I do, is because my mother always like taught me to speak King's English.
Okay.
My father's a Republican.
Huh.
So it's hard to really think of what my dad tried to do. My dad's very business based in that sense as well.
Okay.
But it's very business, very much so. Like, this is how you have to do it, business, blah blah. Very conservative kind of life for him.
Sure.
My mother is more liberal, but in a bit of a more conservative way, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. When you talk about your mother talking about treating others as you would want to be treated, that was a strong principle growing up for myself and my family. My father was predominantly of African descent. My mother was Scandinavian, or is Scandinavian, and so one of the lessons that my parents always teach me, particularly my mother, is the golden rule. And she would always say, think about what the other person is experiencing. And sometimes that's kind of difficult when you're having an argument with somebody and you just want somebody to back you up, and your mother's saying, hey, just think about the other person. But I find that tends to be very pervasive amongst mixed people, about having that empathy towards the other, and the experience towards the other, and just dealing with what other people are experiencing, and having that conscientiousness towards others. So that's cool. So I'm going to go to the third question. You ready? Excellent. And thanks. You're doing excellent. So the third question is what challenges do you experience as a youth? I think it speaks for itself. What challenges do you experience as a youth?
As a youth, as a mixed person, or just
as a mixed person, existentially, socially, however.
That's always been a very delicate kind of issue in my life.
Okay.
Once kids learn about race, it leads to, when I grew up, when I was a little kid, the late 90s, early 2000s. There were a lot more mixed kids in that era, I feel. So it became more socially acceptable, but a lot of just like, well, you can't hang out with us, you're white, or
interesting. Wow.
You're not black, like all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and that kind of, that's where the speech differentiate. I can't say the word. That's where the speech pattern would come from, because you want to fit in, and growing up where I grew up, it's predominantly black school, etc.
Yeah.
You want to fit in. You want to be like everyone else, and everyone's telling you, they call me white boy a lot. They really, really got under my skin with that. No one, my mother doesn't actually understand why it bothers me so much, and I don't even understand why it bothers me so much.
Sure.
It's kind of like don't discredit me.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's,
what? As you say that, I think to myself, it's insulting, or it's devaluing in many different ways. In one way, it's denying your African ancestry and your identity in that respect. And also, obviously, it's as a way of trying to exclude you from that community, and devaluing in that context. But simultaneously, it's intrinsically devaluing your European ancestry as well, saying that's something inferior or something to that effect. So it's having like a double effect simultaneously, which is it's interesting that I just think about that as you say that. So that's rotten.
Yeah. I mean, it messed with my brother and I feel a lot at times. My brother also just wanted to fit in.
Sure.
I wanted to fit in. I've always been kind of a weird kid.
I hear you.
So, the biracial thing definitely messed with that. And also, the kind of alternative black movement, the Afro punk movement kind of thing.
Okay.
That's an interesting one as well, especially when I could easily pass for white if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And the Afro punk movement is interesting because it's like we don't have to conform to a certain way because we are black. You know, we can do these kind of alternative things.
Sure.
And it's interesting for me to even say like Afro punk.
Yeah.
Because my skin is so fair, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily look black, like I say, so that's kind of it's an odd kind of identity there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing. So when everyone looks at you different, not only because you are biracial, you're also more alternative. You're not into the hip hop culture that much. That's also that affects it in an interesting kind of way.
Yeah. So you and I grow up in the same area. I'm born and raised in Cleveland Heights. You in University Heights, right? So those are neighboring municipalities who share the same school system, and so that area is comparatively known for being comparatively diverse, at least in terms of African and European ancestries. So it's interesting because there's and at least I know when I'm growing up, I'm a little bit older than you, but I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so graduated from Heights in 92, and so I know during that period people would always talk about, oh, Heights is so diverse and there's just so much racial harmony and everything, but simultaneously, and there was an element of that. There were people who would get along, and there were friendships between black people and white people, white students and black students. But simultaneously, there were also like boundaries, and there were borders, and even amidst the friendships and everything, there were certain parties and everything else like that. So me growing up, I go to Ruffing from kindergarten to 8th grade, small private school, and then I go to Heights, big public school, and I think people didn't know how to figure me out. And didn't know how to put me into what category. So I was kind of just like the people didn't even make fun of me. People didn't even joke me because people didn't know me that well, and didn't know how to figure me out. So I when you talk about like just belonging and fitting in, I definitely identify with that experience. And I think that many mixed people in the activism that I do, many mixed people communicate that same experience, particularly in adolescence when everybody's starting to be social and everything else. Everybody's finding the right clique and everything to fit into. There are always that challenges. When you were at that age, did you have any like existential questions, or like you talk about identity? Did that challenge of fitting in translate into like who am I, or those bigger type of questions, or was it more of along lines of just social? I wish I was with this group, or I wish this group would accept me, or something to that effect.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a little pointed, but yeah.
I used to wish I was darker, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
It's an interesting kind of thing. I mean,
yeah.
I really did. I wish I was like darker.
Yeah.
So I could fit in with that crowd. And also, like I said, when you like the alternative kind of scene, when you identify with that, automatically, like people think, he's trying to be white. Because of that, and I definitely did. It took some searching in a way. Like I knew what I liked. I knew who I was, what I liked, what I liked to do.
Sure.
I knew the kind of weird artsy stuff I enjoyed.
Sure.
Ventriloquist, which
yeah,
it's rare. it's rare in general.
Yeah.
But also for anyone of like African descent to be that.
Right.
So that already, like, that was another thing. Just a lot of, and then finally it's just kind of like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'll find my own way. And I did. I found okay.
Yeah. So that,
yeah, and also, something I've always found interesting is when white people ask me questions. Like, as you mentioned, they didn't know how to really respond to you or what to ask you. I mean, I felt like I was the ambassador of black people sometimes.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
Certain questions, like, is it true that... I'm asking her, like, is it true that black people do this? Like,
right.
Sure. Why not?
Right. You start decoding the other ethnicity for other people. So yeah, I definitely know what that's like. That's excellent. So you kind of transition us all the way to question 4, which is what solutions do you find as an adult? So you experience these challenges of belonging and identity, and in perhaps existentialism to a certain extent, and you mentioned finding your artistry, your craft. You're a ventriloquist, a puppeteer, an artist, and so and you've been doing that since I've known you over about a decade at this point, almost a decade. So you find that at an early age, and I know that arts is a very powerful vehicle for expression and reconciling the issues that we're experiencing in our psyche and in our interior. So maybe you can speak about the solutions that you find and how you go about that.
I mean, the big thing about art I found is you have to, when you're doing your own personal art that is for yourself, you have your own self-fulfillment with that. No one is, paying you to make something for them. You have to do what makes you happy. You really have to, what is your voice? And once you find that voice, if that makes you feel however, you run with it. I mean, I have a few dummies, but one of my dummies, Skylar, I remember when I got Skylar, I knew, I'd always wanted a black dummy. That was one thing. I always wanted a black dummy, and even crazier, I always wanted a biracial dummy, which I thought I would never find.
I hear you.
And everyone would send me links, what have you, like, oh look, it's just like you, and I'm like, that's way too dark. That's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Etc. But finding that character was interesting. I said right away, I don't want any kind of stereotypes really linked with him.
Okay.
Because usually if, first of all, usually if there's a black guy, there's a white guy performing him or her. And that's just how it is. It's like one of, I don't know, it's like one of a few different types of characters. It's either a rapper or Jamaican.
Stereotypical.
Very stereotypical, yeah. And, that's mainly what you see with black ventriloquists, like puppets, what have you. And I knew right away I didn't want that.
Sure.
I knew right away, I wanted a real person.
Okay.
And a character I identify with. I went with a very, basic name. His name is Skylar Johnson.
Okay.
And Skylar is just a teenager. He's an alternative kind of teenager.
Okay.
He likes, he's a stoner. He likes old bad movies and, very much so kind of punk.
Okay. Sounds somewhat familiar to someone.
It is. No, it is. You put yourself into what you do.
Yeah.
He's a lot more high energy than me, though.
Okay.
That's the contrast.
Okay.
But I knew that I wanted a character and a real person.
All right.
And I also knew I wanted something I could identify with Um, I wanted something relatable, into the scene I'm into. Like, everyone, it's funny, someone looked at it one time, because I'm always on Coventry, and they're like, "Whoa, he's a cover rat, isn't he?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess he kind of is, yeah."
Sure.
Very much so, like a Cleveland Heights kind of guy.
Yeah.
So there's that too, and I really do feel like it was important for him to be real.
Sure.
Like completely realistic.
Yeah, accessible.
And also something someone could identify with.
Yeah.
Other than just a rapper or something.
Sure. Cool. So in your routines, what kind of like topics or issues do you find yourself exploring through the persona of Skylar?
I market myself as an underground ventriloquist.
Okay.
That's, very, very much an alternative kind of culture. So it all depends. Like, I talk about Skylar's girlfriend one time. He's like talking. I was like, "Oh, I love her so much. She's got, this big blue eyes, this great like blonde hair with like red and blue stripes in it." And I'm like, "Oh, so you like white girls, huh?" He's like, "Okay, it's like my daddy, So,
Huh.
And then I've had him talk about like people coming to him at school. He's like, "Oh, this guy came up to me and he's like, 'What's good, homie?' I'm like, he's like, 'Hey, what's up?' It's stuff like that. Like, they expect him to talk a certain way.
Okay.
A lot of my experiences go into that. Like, they expect him to be a certain way, they expect him to talk a certain way.
Yeah.
Kind of looks at them like you're an idiot. Like,
yeah.
Talk to me like a person I've heard you speak before.
Sure.
Talk to me like other people, like you talk to anyone else.
Yeah.
And I touch on topics like that, and I also, I'm a stoner, so I make stoner jokes for sure.
Okay.
And the bad movie kind of references, like, "What, you've never seen that?" Like, you need to see this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-track kind of topic with him. And it's funny because a lot of my political, like, I do like, Instagram videos or Vine videos or something, and a lot of my political kind of stuff goes into, well, he says it, people have actually, like, complained about that. They're like, "I see no kind of character development. This is just Nate, doing his political views." I'm like, well, isn't that what art should be?
Sure.
I mean, just because he's a puppet doesn't mean he can't talk about real issues.
Yeah.
I mean, the earliest puppets talk about issues like Punch and Judy was very political when it first started, 350 plus years ago.
Yeah. Let me pause you 1 second. All right, we're cool. All right, we're back again. So you said Punch and Judy.
So, like I was saying, definitely political in ways. One puppeteer, he was going to be executed for insulting one of the kings.
Wow.
And he got off because he said, "I didn't say it, my puppet said it."
Yeah.
And so I've done, like, this very short time, I hear things on the news, what have you, like, I'll say, like, he'll do Black Lives Matter, he'll say things like that.
Yeah.
I said something, any kind of political topic I think of that, and I tap and say it was really quick little stuff, but I feel like it can be used in that way more than people would think or do.
Cool. So you mentioned before some of the challenges as a youth, talking about belonging and identity, and you find you find art as a process of expression, but also resolution or reconciliation of some of the challenges that you experience. So what are some of the lessons that you learn and solutions that you find as an adult about those previous challenges of belonging and identity that you find as an adult?
I mean, that's once you stop, worrying what everyone's going to think, you can definitely progress more, flourish more,
cool,
etc.
Yeah.
You can, once you stop worrying about that, and also art is therapy for me in ways.
Sure.
Like I really like if I'm feeling awful, I'll draw something, I'll write, etc. Just to get it out, like even just for my own, personal use.
Yeah.
In that sense. And as far as identity goes, once again, just once you stop really caring, I mean, once you're an adult, you don't have to really worry all that much. I feel, at least. I mean, I know people. Once you got to high school, that's when it really started. Like, yeah, this is who we are.
Sure.
We don't have to listen to what you listen to and do what you do. We're gonna do our own thing.
Uh-huh.
And I see people now that I knew from middle school, and then I see graduated together, etc. They're very much so doing their own thing, and they're proud of who they are.
Yeah.
Once you can be proud of who you are and still be a certain way. I know the natural hair movement's very big right now,
sure,
which is really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Women wearing their hair naturally, rocking the afros, and this is me, I'm beautiful.
Right.
And you're not going to tell me what's beauty.
Right.
Once you really decide that for yourself, then the identity process can happen. Once you decide, this is what I'm going to do. I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because and also it could be important to have the experiences I had as a kid because they make you who you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I'd come home crying basically because everyone's making fun of me for being mixed.
Wow.
It's thing mixed kid issues, when you're when you're the only black or white child at your family reunion kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it can definitely help with knowing yourself, knowing who you are, and being comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So that kind of transitions us to the fifth and final question of the interview. And that question is, what message do you have to share with the universe? Given your background, your history, your challenges, your solutions, what wisdom, what lessons do you have to share for the universe?
For the universe. Honestly, one of my biggest things I try to do is just be a good person.
Sure.
Be right by everyone. That and don't. That also means don't let people walk all over you, of course. But
sure.
Definitely treat people right. Be kind, be nice to people. Not once again, don't let people walk all over you, but be polite, be nice. Respectful of people, and usually the favor will come back to you.
Right.
I mean, I know if I wasn't as nice as I am, I would be nowhere.
Sure.
No matter what, I try to make sure that I respect everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people. I listen. I do what I can. I try to be as good a friend as possible. And some people don't see it. That's their issue.
Yeah.
But if you really, share love, spread love, and kindness, it can come back. I mean, I've been stranded places. People bought me taxis, Uber rides. I was stranded.
Wow.
Because they knew me.
Wow.
I do my public work, and I usually work for adults, but when a kid is really, because I do street performance, so when a kid is really in awe of what I'm doing, they don't know how it's working. That's amazing. Smile, laugh. Amazing feeling. Just you never know what can happen. It's nice. I mean, sometimes people are mean sometimes, and that's their issue.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are downright awful. But at the same time, if someone's awful, and to a person, you come back with love, that heals completely.
Sure. Yeah.
If you show love and compassion to someone that's completely like down, it means a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot to that person. It means a lot to you. You can build a friendship. You can build more. You never know. That's really what I try to do in life. In all honesty, I try to just be there for people if they need it. Hopefully they're there for me if I need it. But at the same time, I just want to do right by people. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to, hurt anyone or, ruin anyone any kind of way.
Sure.
And I feel there's always going to be, evil.
No.
It's part of nature. Good and evil is part of nature. I don't believe there's such a thing as complete world peace, but, at least be the person that causes peace and not fear.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what's happening in the world today. A lot of hate.
Yeah.
A lot of hate.
Yeah.
And people are responding with hate, which also comes from fear.
Right.
But people are responding with love. It makes such an impact. I mean, ISIS, threat to the world, and a lot of people are blaming Islam, Muslims, and the thing is, a lot of Muslims, hundreds of thousands of Muslims, no, this isn't us.
Right.
We're about peace. We're about love, and we're going to show you we're about peace and love. Whether you agree with us, whether you want to acknowledge us or not, we're not going to stop.
Right.
This is and it's a lot of hatred and fear. Obviously, love conquers.
Yeah.
So that's definitely how I.
Awesome. I think that's a beautiful message, and I think we can wrap it up with there. So I'm going to hit the record button. Is there anything that you want to promote, or if people want to check you out, is there an Instagram or Vine?
That's all. I'm the one and only. That's my semi-claim to fame. I'm Nate Puppets.
Nate Puppets.
That's what I mean. I already promoted myself a bit. I know I've been ventriloquist, etc. But
Okay.
I don't want to cheapen the message.
Yeah. I know. I just throw that in because I know some other people do that. So I just figured do that. So anyways, thanks for the message. So I'm gonna hit the record button here. The fireflies are dancing. I'm in the park at the moment. I just listened to this convo with Brother Nate, and I'm reminded of the light that he shares and a number of thoughts that I have. Actually, further than considerations, wee bit revelations, just even in this whole podcast venture and additional endeavors. But on the topic of Brother Nate, it's been a while since I talked with him, actually, and I think about that actually even before I listened to the convo today. It is actually about an hour and a half past the scheduled posting time for this podcast, so that's just an FYI for those who are finicky about them clocks. So anyways, it's been a while since I talked with him, and that's actually somewhat typical in our interactions through the years. There may be a year or two where I don't see him, and then all of a sudden he pops up and we chop it up and continue like it was just yesterday. So And actually that's how that combo actually occurs, because I reach out to him on a number of occasions through email and through other tech devices, whatever. Sometimes he responds, sometimes it's a little bit of a delay, whatever. So that was the situation on this joint. I'm making gestures to the computer like I'm video recording it. I'm just actually audio recording this on the software for the first occasion. So anyways, on that occasion a few years ago, for the Mixed Spirits series, I sent some emails, and he responded to one eventually. But even then, it was about maybe like a year or so before we had, since we had spoken most recently. But we were able to arrange it. Had tech difficulties as I described, but we were able to persevere. Gambaru. Then it's like another year or two since I see him again or talk with him. I was off Facebook at that point, but then one day I see him on the bus. We chop it up, catch up on the bus, and one of the things that I'm mindful of is that, like, he experiences challenges, and I'm not trying to like share too much of his personal business or whatever, but he experiences certain challenges. And when we talk on the bus, he mentions that things are better for him at that moment. Like when we had that convo, things were somewhat challenging for him at that moment. And when we talk on the bus, he's like, "Yo, things have been picking up." So that's appreciation for that. But all of that being said, it may be difficult to glean just by listening or whatever. But what I think about when I listen to that convo is and what I consider as a way of describing Brother Nate is grace striving, and how people can look at somebody and they have their chest out and they're nicely manicured or whatever else, and like, oh, that's a winner right there. And if you hear some of the story, oh, they came out on top or whatever. And so it's like a complete story. Like, it's a done deal. The story's over. I don't have to care about them at this point. Just, oh, that's a champion. All right, do whatever they say. But that's like not the whole story. And they're cats who, like, if you look at them, you be like, yo, what's that all about? But if you talk with them, they share love, they share truth, they share wisdom, they share generously. How about that? And they're striving, like they're dealing with things at that moment, and that's awesome. That's next level type stuff. And I ain't gonna tell you too much about it, whatever. I ain't gonna complain about it. I ain't gonna like be hateful about it. And even I'm guilty of doing things like that, or at least being perceived of doing things like that. But just like sharing what they got, and then might be not even have a place to stay that evening, and ain't gonna let you know about it. So, anyways, that's what I think about. It is dusk here in the park. I'm facing westward towards the hiding of the soleil, and it's multicolor in the lower layering of the clouds. We've gotten rain, so the grass is moist. The clouds above are darky blue and purple, and that's the scene at this moment, as lights and wheels zip 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 in the distance. So now additional thoughts. I mean, on the convo, again, Nate shares some insight about it's the personal experience, and actually, rather than speaking specifically about what Nate shares, what I'll say is like what I think about the series at this point. Obviously, bringing in these archives joints is a little bit challenging because after hearing a number of them, it's like the same questions, and so it gets a little bit formulaic, a little bit rigid in terms of like the structure and like the fluidity of the convo. I still think each one is very valuable in and of itself, but I can see the wearing of that. And also, I see my struggling and just being able to like articulate my thoughts in a kind of comfortable way. So that was that series for that. So there's a little changing that 5 years, half a decade ago, 6 years ago. When I think about this series, the podcast, which we're on episode 16 at this point. Again, I begin with a certain amount of structure and recognize like the challenges with that. But even we've covered some. Actually, as I said before, we recorded some new combos. But at this point, I'm deliberating how to proceed with this joint, because obviously I have yet to even like promote it, even like just communication with emails and stuff like that at this point. I'm without a phone at the moment, so doing that affirmational or that kind of confirmational, reaching out to people and be like, hey, this is going on, where people hear people's voices. I'm somewhat distance from doing that. Haha. So in terms of promoting this, telling people about it, I have yet to even do that. And then what are people like focusing on? Do people have time to like think? Because at this point, it's difficult for me to. I'm not even watching anything on YouTube, or I'm not even on social media too tough. So, anyways, I consider like one, and even like making the arrangements as I said before. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. So, in terms of like the structure, I do think about a way of continuing in this joint. And in terms of the structure, part of the purpose of the initial structure is to just have some kind of like standard, anticipating combos with many different people, just having like a standard thing where it's uniform, so that there's a sense of like equality or fairness, something like that, particularly as this joint is initially established. Now that it's there, and there's an increasing, extending comfort level, whatever, supposedly, amidst 106 plays. Wow. I don't want to downplay that, but that's my self-deprecating way of just being modest and honest. But anyways, there's less of a necessity of doing the equality structure, whatever. So my point is, what I consider is just having convo, and that's the other thing too. Like even the other convos outside of these archive series, still like very structured, and for me it abstains from flowing and being natural and like just like back and forth and building like a convo does. And recording it gives a certain increased amount of conscientiousness and cautiousness, recognizing, I got to be careful what I say. But particularly having like set questions beforehand, that's for me, that's different from the combos that I usually have with people, which is just like riffing off what we're talking about at the moment. So that's what I consider doing at this point. As the bunny hops. The bunny has been busy this evening, and the fireflies continue to dance all over the place, and fat water drops leak from the top leaves onto this surface. So doing the combos like back in the day, like yesterday, relaxed, unscripted, unedited, unvideoed, and just doing it. And actually, this is the first time I'm recording on again, like I said, the software for this computer. So seeing how that goes. So what I'm thinking about is doing this. One, whether to do it all, because I said before, you gotta put food on the table, and this ain't doing it directly. And if I'm spending hours trying to reach out to people and prepare and coordinate and everything else, and then doing the recording, and then doing the listening again, and then commentary, that's a lot of hours. And if I need food on the table and this ain't putting it on there, I need to invest those hours in a way that is increasingly productive in the short term, near term, immediate term, now term. So anyways, like I said, all that said, what I consider is this: I'm still like chilling out in the village. I've adjusted my routine, my weekly routine, so my rounds are different than what is previously within recent years. But I'm still kicking it in the village, and chopping out with people who stop by. And so my consideration is just then record that, ask if people want to be on a podcast, and then ask them what they want to talk about, and then we talk about that. And there's an episode right there. However long it is, that's what it is. And So let's see how that goes. And I also consider doing that with brethren on online through one of the calling mechanisms, conference calling, because it's very interesting how like free calling, like calling people's mobile phones, at least presumably in the United States, is like extremely prohibitive. Like, gotta have a mobile phone to connect with another mobile phone. Video conferencing call can connect computers. That's a very socioeconomic apartheid type policy. And yeah, well, I can go into my whole, we're in a scientific totalitarian state at this moment, but that's a whole nother spiel. Love and peace to all scientists and all people, all brethren, all beings. So I will share something increasingly positive and perhaps inspirational. I'm lifted by it. So I speak on recent occasion on the experience of being mélangé, and how the core of mélangé, the core of like what it is to be mixed, is the core of the earth. And there are different ways of being mixed. There are different there are different mixes. But the core of the experience of mix is the exact core of the earth, and it's a distinguishing characteristic about the ethnicity of being mixed ethnicity compared to all other ethnicities. Because all other ethnicities, when one looks into like the deep rootedness, the core of that specific ethnicity, it's still very specific to that geographic area. Whereas the core of Mélangé is the exact core of the earth. And so what I described is that there's a way of being around that core, and it's other than saying I'm everything and I represent everything, I'm authentically everything. That's not what it's saying, because that's different. That's just different from the nature of the core. But there is a certain amount of commitment, allegiance, identification, solidarity with the aggregate of the sphere that surrounds the core. There's some pop in the distance, but it sounds like fireworks at this point. Plus, the direction it's coming from is not usually where the pop goes off. Core of Mélangé. So that's, for those who identify as such, that's a consideration. Some Mélangé brethren may be somewhat identify or find their home base somewhat distant from the core, but still in like that zone. And some may reside on a further surface level of one of another ethnicity. But my point is that in that core, in the zone of that core, the extending zone, wherever one finds one's specific home base, home point, there is a certain peace. That's the homeland of Mélangé. And in that homeland, there's a way of being. There's like protocols. There's ethics. There's rules, and those rules are exactly the ways of all the different lands together in that core. So, anyways, that's one consideration in the experience of being Mélangé, is that core of Mélangé, and the culture, the rules, the law, the protocols that are affiliated with that core of Mélangé, of being Mélangé. That's one thing. Now, additionally, what I share for today, for this convo, is when listening to Nate, Brother Nate, talk about his experience growing up and interacting with students, it's much of the same convo about belonging, identity, being challenged about authenticity, and additionally, and for those who in the mixed community, we know very well about that. We talk about that, and it's appropriate to address it, but it's also appropriate to build from that as well. And so part of that is having a culture, having like a swagger, having inside jokes, having code language, having forms of expression, having narratives, knowing our legends, historically, our ancestors, our prophets, our sages, our songs, and additionally, Beyond, it's beautiful to have pop culture icons that represent in certain ways, but it's also a matter of getting beyond that intergenerationally, and building culture that it's beyond our generation, beyond our lifetime, and that connects all our generations together: elders, adults, youth, children, and additionally. So that's part of it. And now on that note, one of the things that we're working on is storytelling, ancient youth storytelling, but also hip hop music, and bringing in ethics, rules, how the game is. What is the game? The world game, the corporate game, the national game, but also like the street game, and then the righteous game, all that together. And how does hip hop express this? How does hip hop strengthen and enforce this, communicate this through the message, through the storytelling, and additionally. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on. We identify Singapore. Well, actually, before I say that, what I'll say is I was listening to some Mos Def, Mighty Mos Def, aka Yasin Bey, who a couple years ago does an interview with one of the radio stations in the Haudenosaunee land of New York, and describes his experience of traveling in the Zululand, in Xhosa, amongst the Xhosa, South Africa, in other words, and how he's traveling on a world passport. I've shared this before on a number of different platforms before, but he travels on a world passport, and he gets stopped, and then he gets detained for a year in South Africa, in Cape Town. And so he talks about that experience very briefly, and then he also talks about hip hop, and he talks about hip hop being around the earth. He talks about being in Russia and seeing a hip hop festival where there's graffiti art, young people, families bringing their children additionally, and him seeing like how a culture that emerges from the streets of his hood nearby, the Bronx, the Boogie Down, how the culture, how the experience, it resonates around the earth, and it's distinctive, and there's respect and honor for the origins, but then it's also adjustable. It's also it also works with the respective culture that absorbs it and accepts and builds with it. And so cats are flowing in Russian, and in Mandarin, and in Twi, and additionally, so in Hindi, and additionally, so that's one of the awesome, beautiful, powerful, actually, things about hip hop, and about youth culture, because we people, brethren of this land, on the continent where I'm sitting, are purveyors of that culture, and that we have a lot to do in terms of building the infrastructure through which the culture is shared. Technology, the telecommunications platforms through which the messaging is shared, and additionally, and many cats may be unaware of like the actual technology, how to do that, how to put it together, how to establish a factory that puts those parts together. Actually, many of us do know how to do that, but it's a matter of being able to have the political, economic, contractual autonomy to utilize that knowledge in such a way that is increasingly independent for such individuals and our immediate collective. That's one part of it, but it takes a lot of doing, though, because it's not just a matter of like putting on a website. It's a matter of like constructing servers, and having some type of internet connection to facilitate people's connection with the World Wide Web. It even involves telecommunications in terms of either mobile or satellite or other forms of communication. So it's like it's intricate, it's involved, it's a thing, but it doesn't need to be everything overnight. And one of the things is just looking at the first steps, and what we do have within our immediate stewardship in our decision capacity, so to speak. And what that is like the message itself, the experience, but also the legacy, the elders who established it and who continue to contribute to it, So we have a lot of things on our favor, on our side of the table, in the negotiation process of leveraging how to go from where we are at the moment to being increasingly the decision makers in the infrastructure that shares what we provide. And but we have to have discipline. We have to have organization, and it's not just a matter of saying, oh, we want this. We got to get out of that like spoiled baby mentality of complaining about things and expecting to be given just because we raise a fuss. We have to like stand up, be adults, be responsible, and recognize the authority within us. Be like, look, ain't nobody gonna give this. Not even just whether it's not a matter of deserving it or justice. Like, yo, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to handle that? Like, yeah, we can give this to you, but then what are you gonna do with it? You can just gonna spend it up and it's gonna be gone in 6 months. It's not even a matter of us not wanting you to have it. It's like we don't think you can handle it. So we got to handle it. But be genuine about it. So that's part of it. We have things in our capacity to that level the leverage in our negotiations. So now, but part of it also is that cat's selling out for stupid shit. Yeah, excuse my English. For wine and weed, big houses, big cars, and all that stupid stuff. And that's on us. That's on us for supporting that. That's on us for patronizing that. That's on us for emulating that. All the big names, everybody. That's holding us back. In who is us? Black folk, white folk, yellow folk, red folk, all folk. So brown folk, whoever, whatever, you got it. Green folk, blue folk. But I don't like doing the green because the people are like, you don't mean nothing. You know what I'm talking about. So anyways, that's on us. And when we invest our Convo on those names and the stupid stuff, when we invest our economics in that, we just throw away stuff. It's waste. And then we can't complain about it afterwards. So we have I don't say control, because ain't who controls what? Ain't nobody control nothing. We have certain stewardship of very valuable commodities, culture, love, actually, even truth, righteousness, but we have to be responsible stewards in that as well, and that also involves collective cooperation, discipline, genuinely being out for each other instead of just taking the big paycheck and then moving away where one is anonymous. It takes a lot, and it doesn't take anything beyond what we already have, but it takes a certain amount of doing. Alright. So that is again on us. So when Mos Def is talking about this, when Yasin Bey is talking about this, and talking about his experience of being in different places, encouraging people to visit these different places, and not just talk about it, but do it. It resonates because I do that, and I share that same message, that same encouragement, that same inspiration. And I also consider, for those who have done it, and those who have the means, we need to step our game up in setting up programs of exchange, encouraging people to set aside resources for a year, save up, and then participate on an excursion program or a study abroad program. You ain't in university, don't need that. Let's do a village to village exchange program. And additionally, so it does not take very much. And you're talking about transportation, this, that, and the other these days, but anyways, and the recording was a couple years ago, but anyways, it is what it is, and it continues in a proficient way. So, but it's a matter of what we're doing to it. So, Yasin Bey talks about hip hop culture and stepping up and being part of that, upping the game. Now, along those lines, what I share with brethren within recent work is the idea of pluralism. So, hip hop has a very distinct culture, originally has a very distinct culture, urban, Afrocentric consciousness, one of struggle. Hi. One of struggle, one of intrinsic righteousness. Aha! I blend. So that's part of like the original culture of hip hop. Counterculture in many ways, paralleling initially with like the punk movement, additionally, but distinct in its own right. But like I said, now it's like every major like ethnic region around the earth has some type of hip hop movement. You can call me out on that. Did I do the scientific research for that? You can look it up yourself. Anyways, it's there, and it's again, it's shared in that its origins and the construct of it, but it's also each one is unique to its own origins, its own stories, its own narratives, its own culture from which it emerges, specifically, respectively. Said this already. So what I'm saying is that recognizing that part of who I am, what I'm involved in, and what I am invested in, what I support, and what I'm connected to, what I build with, is the experience of pluralism, bridges amidst all these, and not just like a bridge that connects the different cultures, but actually a culture of pluralism. As I mentioned before, like with Mélanger, having a distinct language, a distinct code, a distinct narrative, and additionally, amongst people who are interested in that experience of pluralism, so that it's a home base in its own right. So what I share with brethren recently is the notion of earth pluralism evolving, the culture of earth pluralism evolving, much like the culture of hip-hop. And somewhat different, somewhat distinct in certain ways, but the consideration is locales in the earth, around the earth, building from this experience, or building this experience of pluralism, building these cultures, building these forms of expression, sharing ancient songs, and through ancient songs building new songs, sharing ancient stories, and through the ancient stories sharing new stories, and doing it in creative, vibrant ways that spark the lights of children, spark the imagination of children, inspire the elders, connect the adults, reconcile the adults, and additionally, so it's difficult to define or to like encapsulate hip-hop as just like a culture, because it's beyond just like a cultural expression. But that's a consideration with pluralism as well, not just like an ideology or like a nice little corporate slogan or whatever, but like an actual experience that's tangible, that's rooted, that's ancient, but that's new and innovative. So that's the consideration with pluralism, and me being biased as we can only be. In this, I share that the Cuyahoga area where I am sitting right at this moment, as the clouds get darker, this being like the Bronx, the Bronx of pluralism, and Singapore being the Brooklyn of pluralism, because Singapore is situated to be that. English and Chinese are the major languages of humanity. We can anticipate that being the case for the next century. And Singapore has a plurality of, again, that word is a little bit different. It has intrinsic pluralism and fundamental pluralism within its society, ethnically and religiously. So it's dependent upon proficient policies and experiences of pluralism. That's rife for that type of investment and support for that type of cultural and further expression of pluralism. So to decode that somewhat for those who are less familiar with like hip hop parlance. The Bronx is where hip hop is credited to officially begin, through gatherings and additionally the organization, the leadership, just emerging in the Bronx, and then it spreads, and the adjacent borough of Brooklyn has a community where the hip hop flourishes, and so many of the big names through many years come from Brooklyn. So many people like myself actually would think that acts like Tribe Called Quest, and additionally back in the 90s, 80s and 90s, because those groups were so prominent and would big up Brooklyn so much, it would seem like, oh, hip hop must be, the center must be Brooklyn, but actuality, it actually starts in the Bronx. So what I'm saying is that this Cuyahoga area, nondescript, whatever, but low key, again, particularly because of yours truly. And who am I? I'm a piece of dirt. I walk with God, but I ain't nothing. I am dedicated to this cause, and it's in a way that is difficult to see anybody else doing at the moment as well. So recognizing that, it's just a matter of understanding the nature of it and seeing how things emerge accordingly. So there's that. That's the Cuyahoga, the Bronx. However, as I say, it's tough to see anything popping off in a big, prominent way from this Cuyahoga. Part of the nature of here is being modest. It's not just the nature of the city and the people, but also the surrounding area of settlerhood. So that's why I say Singapore is the Brooklyn in this scenario, because Singapore is increasingly positioned for the prominence to emerge and take hold, to take root, to take attention within the game of pluralism. Anyways, I've riffed on this long enough. That's where things are at this moment. We continue with the pluralism clubs, so continue with the pluralism relief agency. Those are the two focuses at this point. The foci. Yeah, we're actually again in the situation where the commentary here is actually longer than the convo. For the next month, planning the sessions for the next month. We have a couple of new sessions, couple new things. We have another archive convo from the Mixed Spirit series, and then I'm thinking of like concluding for the month with the other intro, the first episode, or the intro joint that I share for this podcast series. I think I described this in the first intro that my first intro, the first intro recording that I do for this podcast was like 2 hours, and obviously that's way long. And so I recorded another one, and that's the one I actually put up and said I might share the other one at some later point. So we are approaching that later point, and I'm in additional work that I do. I share a schedule of like the podcast releases for the upcoming month. So I have that task in front of me at the moment, and so I have to plan that. So that's what I'm looking at: two new combos, an archive convo, and then the original intro that's like 2 hours long or something, 2 hours. So that's what I'm looking at for the next month, and God willing that will happen. And so after that, I'm still like deliberating about how to proceed, whether to how much effort to put into new recordings, new podcast episodes, see how responsive people are to just having a convo off rip. It may be people that I already have convos with. It may be people that I just meet on that day. That's a regular for me. But I also have to recognize, I gotta work on food. So we'll see. Basically, I'm saying we'll see. We'll see where it goes. So that's this joint. also working on organization in terms of like the whole media. Oh, Rojak Rostam is started. That website is up at this point. It features a lot of me at this point. But that's another thing too. Recording storytelling from ancient storytelling from youth. So we're working on the mechanics of that, and there's some additional things in the works. So that's continuing the occasion. But that being said, I'm gonna wrap it up with that. Passing the hat. Am I still doing that? What I'll say on that is that obviously still don't have a bank account, so ain't even like it's hidden up for donations. But again, we're emphasizing the methodology of 1%, and offering things on the basis of either 1% of a weekly income, 1% of a monthly income, or 1% of a yearly income, depending on what it is, whether it's a membership, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, or otherwise. That's the methodology. And again, that's different from what people are accustomed to, but we think that's what's most fair. Because we're not falling susceptible or whatever. We're not being susceptible to that scenario of rich folk who want to feel better to just give a little piddly donation, and then the recipient be so thankful for receiving something that the recipient can do things with, but for the person giving, it's like, whatever, it's just whatever. But they get the credit of, I gave my thing, I did my benevolent deed or whatever. So it's a matter of, if you value it, a percentage, not a straight dollar point or whatever the currency is. It's a percentage. So that if you're making a lot, then the percentage is the resulting amount is increasing accordingly. If it's not worth that much, then fine. If it is, then cool. And if you're not making that much, then it's again 1%. It ain't hurting you that too much. So that's what we're working on. It seems just so too fair, but it also seems so too foreign as a concept that people just seem to. And again, I recognize that it's divulging. I'm telling what my income is or whatever, but. That's, again, we have to get over that as well. Are we going to trust each other? We want to be. We're all in this together, but we're not going to share our W-2s. What actually does it mean to be together then? And I'm not advocating a society where everybody tells what they're making, whatever. But money is very divisive and secretive, and that erodes social cohesion. So for those who have an inclination towards cooperation and enlightenment, and additionally, guess where that continues through the bank account, and that's not, again, it's not a matter of like donations, just like letting go of that secrecy and all the different things that are enveloped in that envelope. It's a little bit strained, but anyways, and I'm getting a little bit preachy, so that's what I have to share. Basically, the point is percentages, and giving and taking. On that, namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mir, zaijian, adios, te chakris, esempena asabu, kila ofred, one love and peace.